Hello, and welcome to Scratch Paper, a writing-related podcast. I'm Alicia de los Reyes, and this is episode 29. In case you don't know me, I'm a writer and a parent of a toddler, and in this podcast, I share updates, writing prompts, questions, and a lesson or a pep talk. You can find the show notes and sign up to my newsletter at aliciadelosreyes.com. That's ALICIADELOSREYES.com. If you're a new listener, welcome. I am so happy to have you here. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. This week, I don't have a writing or a reading I do have a quick reading update, which is I'm reading Victoria by Daisy. I can't remember her last name, but I will link to it in the show notes. And it's kind of a long, slow book, but I'm enjoying it. It's kind of the level of action I need in the evening, which is to say not very much. So that's my reading update. Writing, I am working on the podcast. So I'm waiting for some feedback and kind of in a pause on my current novel, which is tentatively called Wait. And it's about a psychic who is helping an evangelical family whose foster daughter has stopped talking. But like I said, no new progress on that front. So, this week, I am starting kind of a mini series. I think it's just going to be 2 episodes long on research. And I talked about research in one episode 8, a while back. And I'll link to that in the show notes. And, but it was kind of an overview about like how you can use research in your writing. And in this mini series, I'm going to talk about research for nonfiction, specifically interviewing for nonfiction. And then research for fiction, kind of a more broader like interviewing and maybe some other things you can do to research for fiction. So I wanted to talk about this because I remember when I first had to do an interview when I was in my grad school program, I called up my friends who had been journalists and asked them what I should do because I had never done an interview before. And I was terrified. And I thought, this is some useful information that I could pass on to you guys if you're interested in doing an interview yourself, especially in this episode for writing whether you're working on like narrative nonfiction, a manuscript or an article, an essay that's like a really research-based essay, or an article that you're trying to pitch to a magazine or newspaper. So I've written for weeklies and for magazines. And like I said, I got these tips from my friends Larry and Jenny, who both wrote for newspapers and now write for alumni magazines. And Jenny just published a book called The Boy Who Loved Too Much. And it's excellent. Highly recommend. But anyway, so today I'm going to be talking about interviewing tips for nonfiction. And like I said, in that first, the episode 8, the earlier podcast, there's some reasons why you might want to do interviews. But I just wanted to break it down a little bit here and say that when you go to do an interview, you probably have maybe one of 2 goals in mind, especially like if you're working on an article or an essay. You're either looking for kind of background or overview information to kind of help you get started, or you're looking for quotes that you can include in the essay or article. And I just wanted to say that regardless of what your mission is, I think that all of these tips apply, because even when I've gone in with like a particular idea of how the interview would help me, it hasn't always worked out that way. So, but before I get into the actual tips, I wanted to do a kind of mini writing prompt to help you brainstorm who you might want to talk to and give you a reason to talk to them. So even if you don't have a particular essay or article in mind, you can still start with this little like kind of brainstorming exercise and see if you come up with some people who you might be interested in interviewing. So I'm going to read the prompt to you and give you an example. And you can feel free to pause and write down your ideas as you're listening. And if you want, for this episode, I'm going to make a worksheet And you can find that at aliciadelosreyes.com/podcast29. And you can sign up to get the worksheet. And I will also send you my newsletter, which is just the show notes as of now. And I'll send the worksheet to you, and it will have step-by-step how to do this brainstorming activity that I'm going to walk you through now, and also an example of my answers, including the last part. So anyway, let me get into it so that it's all clear. Okay, so the writing prompt is to first make a list of people who you've always wanted to learn more about or from. So anybody, whether they are like your next door neighbor or a coworker or a more famous person or like somebody between like the boss of your company, the CEO of some other company, something not business related, a politician, anybody who you think who you are interested in. So, make a list of all those people and try and come up with at least 10. And then the next step is to brainstorm topics related to these people. So that could be anything from like areas of expertise, where they live, career, or family life. And my guess is that when you thought of the person, when you were making your list of people, you had a reason that you wanted to talk to them. So write down that reason next to their name. And then try and think of like another reason or two why you might want to talk to them. And then go through your list and see if there's something that you could turn into an article that other people might want to read. And if you can think of a publication for it, that's even better. But you don't have to do that. Just think of a way to make the topic less like just interesting to you and more interesting to a wider audience. So you could try and make it be helpful to people or to reveal something, get at a bigger topic, or examine some aspect of like human nature or life. Make it broader basically and appealing. And then the last step is to craft an email to ask to interview this person. And I'll give an example of the email in the worksheet, like I mentioned. But the basic gist is to write, "Dear so-and-so," be super polite. I'm working on an article about blah, and I would really like to talk to you if you have some time. And then give a specific amount of time that you think it'll take, maybe like 20 minutes, half an hour. Don't ask for too much of their time. And ask them for a specific time frame, like next week, and mention that you'd be happy to meet with them where and whenever is convenient to them. And then, thank you very much, your name, blah, blah, blah. So as an example of a person who I would really love to interview, my absolute favorite writer is Geraldine Brooks. I have a bookshelf, which I may have mentioned on here before, called the Geraldine Brooks Shelf. And it has all of her books, including, accidentally, the best American fiction that she edited, which is totally random. I had to buy it for a class, and she happened to be the editor that year. So anyway, I love Geraldine Brooks, and the topics that I am most fascinated about, the topic about Geraldine Brooks's writing that I am most fascinated about is the amount of research that goes into it. So I mentioned this before, that I have read, there's this book, The People of the Book, and I basically reread it like once or twice a year. It's a really good book. I just love the structure. I think it's like a fabulous premise for a book. The premise of The People of the Book is that this really, really old manuscript is found, and it's a really particular, strange artifact. And so this art historian comes in, or I think she's an art historian. She restores books also. And she is going through and she finds a few things in the pages, like, I forget, like a hair or something like that, very small things. And she goes around to different experts and has them analyzed. And at each moment that she finds something, you go back in time and see how that thing got there. And it goes to different periods of time. And I just love it. I just think it is like perfect. It's just, I would love to write a book like that someday. So the last time I reread this book, I noticed that like every single page is just loaded with not information in the way like fact after fact after fact. It's just full of detail that Geraldine Brooks had to have researched like in great depth. So she writes about being a Jewish girl in medieval London, I think. And there's details about where this girl lives, like the way that her parents talk, the responsibilities that she has, the freedoms that she has, just like details about her daily tasks that are so impressive to me. And so anyway, so I'm fascinated by Geraldine Brooks and how she does her research. And so the topics related to this would be like research, method of writing. I'm not sure what else. I should have written this down ahead of time. Like how long it takes her to write a book. These are all things that I'm just like curious about. But then to kind of turn it and make it into a topic that other people could use, I think, because I'm doing a podcast like this, I think it's useful for other people to learn how to research from writers, because it's kind of different from researching that you do in your like college courses or high school classes where you're researching and then collecting facts and maybe making a thesis, but you're not really like creating a fictional world. So I think it would be really interesting to learn more about how different writers use research to create like setting, let's say, for fiction or nonfiction projects. So that's kind of my broader, like, here's what I would pitch to a magazine. In this case, it would be a writing related magazine. And so that would be the topic of my essay. This is getting really rambly, so I'm going to cut it short here and actually get to the tips. But I hope that this little writing exercise gets you thinking, and I wanted to share it because it's actually like one of the reasons that I got into writing, because I'm really curious about people, and I like having an excuse to want to pick their brains about things that they've done or decisions that they've made, or what their life is like, what their career is like. I am so into all that stuff. So this little exercise is kind of the way I've gone about figuring out what I want to write about next. A lot of times it starts with people. Okay, so moving on. Today I'm going to talk about interviewing for nonfiction. And next week I'll talk about interviewing and research for fiction. And the basic difference is that research for fiction is, especially interviewing, is like less stringent. Like you don't have to maybe write down word for word people's quotes. But for nonfiction, you want to be really careful because you're using somebody else's words and people can feel really strongly about that. And also it's important to like give an accurate portrayal of what somebody told you. So the stakes are a bit higher for interviewing when you're writing nonfiction. So here are the tips that my friends told me and that I have used over and over again. And whether you're like calling up a running store owner to ask about, their ideas for winter running gear for an article for a newspaper, or you're talking to a pastor for a narrative piece on evangelicalism, these tips will apply in like all these different contexts. So, okay. So first things first, send a polite introductory email or call and leave a polite introductory message, and be sure to include like how you got the person's name and information. So if you're calling up a running store, you might just say, hi, my name is Alicia. I write for The Wire and I'm doing an article on winter running. I was wondering if I might be able to talk to the owner and ask for some tips on winter running to include. That is like a totally reasonable request that most people would be happy to fulfill. If you're writing an email that's a little bit more, it's like a little trickier subject, just be sure to include, hi, my name is Alicia. I'm working on an article about blah. It doesn't necessarily have to be for a particular publication. It's totally fine to just be working on like an article or an essay. And I'd really like to talk to you about X. Is there a time you can meet me next week? I'd be happy to come and see you, blah, blah, blah. So big takeaway there is, like I said, you don't have to have a specific publication that you're writing. You can just you can just mention that you're working on an article or an essay, and that, if they ask, you can tell them where you plan to pitch it to. But the other one is, if you do have a publication that you're writing for, definitely include that, of course. And just be really polite and act like it's normal. So even if it feels nerve-wracking to you, chances are the person you're interviewing has been interviewed before. And if not, they'll be flattered. They won't be like, most people won't be taken aback or unhappy that you called. The next one, meet somewhere that's convenient to them. Keep in mind that especially if you don't know the person, be safe and meet in a public place, but it's totally fine, go and meet them at their store, meet them at a coffee shop, something like that. You don't have to have an office or anything like that. Once you're in the interview, take notes and write down everything. I also really like to take notes on the setting, like where I am, what time of day, maybe what the person's wearing, any little gestures or things like that you notice. You can even write down what you're wearing, things that you notice, maybe if you're meeting in a coffee shop, the kind of noise that goes on. All those little details can help you later when you're writing. Then when you're doing the actual interview, take notes on what the person says. And I like to circle or asterisk, star the things that I write down that are the word for word quotes so that I know I can use them later. So sometimes when you're interviewing someone, you hear them say something, you're like, oh, that's a good quote. So make sure you note that it's a quote. You can definitely record an interview. I usually just use that for backup. I don't usually transcribe my interviews because it takes an awful long time. I do have a small recorder, but I think most people now just use their phones. And I think a phone is also makes the other person a little bit more comfortable than a kind of old school reporter's recorder does. So that's something that can be useful. But again, I really like to keep notes because I think it helps me better remember what actually happened. The biggest one, which my friend Jenny told me, is don't act like you know everything. It's actually more useful to ask questions and be dumb. So even if you do kind of know what they're talking about, feel free to ask them can you clarify that, or can you explain what you mean? And ask follow-up questions if you don't understand, because then you just have more things that they told you. And then the other thing that's kind of related is people love to talk about the things that they care about, the things that they do. So let the other person talk, and feel free to pause. Don't be you don't have to ask a question and then be silent for 5 minutes. But if there is a pause, don't feel like you have to fill it. Let the other person fill it, because often they'll say interesting things. Ask if you can follow up if you think of a question, either by email or by phone, just to let them know that, you might be contacting them again later, even if you don't think you will, because so many times I would get back home and realize I have to get another quote for the article, or I really didn't quite understand what was happening. And then it's perfectly fine to just call them up or email. And if you let them know ahead of time, then they can be, not taken aback when you do that. If a person asks for questions ahead of time, which has only happened to me once, that's a pretty reasonable request, I think, but I don't give them the questions. I'll tell them the general topics that I'll be talking about. Not because I don't want them to be prepared or go into it cold or something, just because I kind of want it to flow naturally. And if we have a list of questions that I'm working from, that seems awkward to me. Another thing to ask for is other people to talk to or resources. I should have mentioned this before, but like, so when you're finishing up, say, like, is there somebody else I can speak to or something you recommend I read or watch or something like that? So then the other like point of etiquette is that the person might ask to read the article before it goes to, like, gets published. And you don't have to let them read the article. It's up to you. If you want them to, you can. But I don't usually do that. What I do is send over the quotes that I've used so that the person can see exactly which of their words I'm including. And I think that's really reasonable. And other nonfiction writers and journalists have told me that that's what they do too. So it's pretty common practice. And then the last point is you might have a negative experience, but that's okay. So I have had negative experiences on the phone and over email. I've never had one in person, thank God. But I also was like the fun features writer when I worked for the weekly that I wrote for. But even then, I encountered people on the phone who just were not interested in talking to journalists at all and were rude to me or, almost hung up. And it's pretty, like, for a sensitive person like me, it's pretty, like, devastating when somebody hangs up on you, even if it's over, like, a silly article. But it's okay. It happens to everybody. And the other type of negative experience I've had is after writing something, and this I think is maybe a bigger fear. After writing something and then, it gets published and I send it out to all the people who have helped me write it, including the people I've interviewed. And I have gotten feedback like, that's not what I meant. I don't agree with the way that you represented me. And that also is okay. And to be honest, I think that sucks a lot more and is harder to deal with. But I think at the end of the day, if you do the best that you can and write the most accurate and truest portrayal of a situation and a person that you can feel good about it and let it go. And you can also tell the person, feel free to write a letter to the editor. They will probably appreciate your viewpoint and be likely to publish it. I mean, who knows if they will publish it or not, but an interviewee who is unhappy, that's a totally reasonable mode of recourse for them to write a letter to the editor. And so I think those are kind of like the possible negative aspects. And I think that overwhelmingly interviewing has been a positive experience for me. So it's always a little bit scary and intimidating to ask somebody to give you their time. And I think it feels kind of funny to writers because you're not paying them or giving them anything, they're really doing you a favor. But people really do love to talk about the things that they care about and that they're interested in. And they get excited when you're talking with them, when they can see that you're interested in it too. And a lot of people like seeing their name in print. So that's an exciting aspect of it to them. And you're giving them that opportunity. And I have just learned so much from interviewing people that I wouldn't trade that experience, even though it does sometimes cause stress. So if you are worried about doing it, but you want to, I would say go for it. And the worst that can happen is it's a awkward half hour. And I've had plenty of those and I've survived. So you can too. So if you are interested in reading these tips in a downloadable format, for this episode only, I made a little worksheet, like I mentioned. You can get it at Alicia de los Reyes /podcast29. And that'll also include that brainstorming activity, hopefully in a clearer manner than I did maybe in this particular podcast. And you can also find the show notes with links to everything at aliciadelosreyes.com. Thank you so much for listening and have a great week.